radio. I mean, it was like 4 different stories were breaking after I had typed up my.
I was curious, when I was driving in, I was thinking, oh, that's going to.
Oh yeah, so I had to change. Hopefully, I can read my own chicken scratch handwriting, but I think I'll make it through. Let's see here.
So, what did you? Anything else that was added?
No, I don't think so. That was the main thing. If we get to the end and we're loose, did you all see this thing about Trump and the Bible?
Sometimes they drop the rice, but it's all.
Good evening. This is the Daily Drum for Wednesday, March 27th. I'm Bramante Bryant in for Harold Fisher. Well, we begin with the latest regarding the collapse of Baltimore's Key Bridge. Officials announcing within the hour that the bodies of 2 of the missing 6 construction workers that were on that bridge when it collapsed Tuesday after being hit by a cargo ship have been found.
Divers located a red pickup truck submerged in approximately 25 feet of water in the area of the middle span of the bridge. Divers recovered two victims of this tragedy trapped within the vehicle. The victims were identified as Alejandro Hernandez Fuentes, 35 years old, of Baltimore, and Dorlian Raniel Castillo Cabrera, 26 years old, of Dundalk.
Authorities say the search for the 4 other presumed dead construction workers has been canceled and called off because of the danger to divers due to the large amount of bridge debris in the Patapsco River. Well, the Wizards and Capitals will not be leaving D.C. for Virginia after all. Today, the city of Alexandria ended negotiations to bring the 2 sports teams to the city with the hope of a new sprawling sports and entertainment complex to be located in Potomac Yards. Virginia's General Assembly rejected any funding for that project, and within the hour, D.C. announced a $515 million deal for the team's owner, Ted Leonis, that will keep the team in the nation's capital through the year 2050. Mayor Bowser on the dramatic developments.
To invest $500 million in the total transformation of Capital One Arena in downtown Washington. We, with the teams, have identified additional opportunities to expand their footprint right here in downtown, and we're also going to invest $15 million in that. And as Ted likes to say, we're going to be together for a long time.
Part of the millions will go towards upgrades to Capital One Arena, as well as increased security outside of that facility. Well, 2 women were shot today at a daycare center in Springfield. Fairfax County Police say the incident happened around 2 o'clock this afternoon at the KinderCare facility in the 8500 block of Bauer Drive. The women suffered non-life-threatening injuries in what police believe is a domestic-related incident. Authorities are searching for 41-year-old Julio Seans. They say he showed up at the center searching for his estranged wife. None of the 70 children in the center at the time were injured. And round 3 of D.C.'s push to make its neighborhoods as drug-free as possible. 7 new drug-free zones in the district went into effect today. Those areas established in each of the city's 7 police districts in Northwest, Northeast, Southwest, and Southeast D.C. And the 3 white men who in 2020 chased, then shot and killed Ahmaud Arbery in a Georgia subdivision asked a federal appeals court today to throw out their hate crime convictions. The men say prosecutors relied on their history of racist comments without proving they targeted Arbery because he was black. Here's a look at the weather. The rain stays with us through the night and into tomorrow, unfortunately. Highs Thursday in the low 50s. Well, coming up, the Reporters Roundtable, and we'll look at some of the top stories of the week. Insight is next on WHUR and WHUTV.
WHUT is dedicating weekdays at 10:30 a.m. to bring you the best of our locally produced series, like our Arts and Artists show, Artico, our energetic music series, DMV The Beat.
Get Out. When I wrote that song, we were fighting.
And stories highlighting the endurance of the human spirit with legacy.
He used to say to me all the time, when I die, the newspaper's yours.
So remember, tune in weekdays at 10:30 a.m.
Howard University Television PBS and WHUR 96.3 are joining forces Wednesday nights at 7 p.m. as we bring you Harold Fisher and the Daily Drum live as we take you inside the stories of the DMV. We've got the experts and the people that matter most to help you make informed decisions for your family and your community. That's the Daily Drum, Wednesday nights at 7 p.m. live on WHUT and WHUR. Better together.
Welcome back to the Daily Drum on WHUR, SiriusXM channel 141, 96.3 HD2 and 98.3 FM and WHUT TV. This is the Insight segment. I'm Bermonte Bryant in for Harold Fisher. We're at the Reporters Roundtable tonight talking about the top stories of the week, and they include the catastrophic collapse of Baltimore's Key Bridge, which has been dominating the news so far this week. More drug-free zones in the district, and journalists at a major network take a stand on truth and accuracy, betting and racism in college hoops. And the news that just broke, the Washington Wizards and the Washington Capitals staying in the nation's capital. Here to join us to talk about all these top stories of the week, Dr. Yanick Rice-Lamb, Howard University professor, journalism professor, and co-founder of FierceForBlackWomen.com. Always good to see you, Yanick.
Great to see you, too.
And Reecie Colbert, founder of BlackWomenViews Media and contributor and host at SiriusXM. Nice to meet you, Reecie.
Nice to see you.
We've talked before on the radio. Now here we are on the television. So here we are. We start this show, and just within the hour, Alexandria, the mayor, goes online, makes this announcement, says, all of the partisan bickering in Richmond meant we couldn't get a deal to bring those 2 sports teams, the Wizards and the Capitals, to Potomac Yards, but we're going to move forward. A half an hour later, 45 minutes later, the mayor then has a press conference to say, we've got a deal with Ted Lewansis, and he's going to stay in D.C., which is what I predicted early on. But here we are. He's got a $515 million deal. That's what he wanted initially, and the mayor kind of laid back and sort of waited a little while to offer it, but now it's come back around. I want to get your thoughts on, is this a good thing for the city, for the mayor? Because you've got politics involved here, too. What do you think, Yanick?
I think it's always a good thing to keep the team in the city. I think moving into Virginia would have been a mistake. And it's always a ploy that people go through also to try to get more money and threaten to leave. So I think he was just trying to get the best deal possible. But I'm glad that they're staying here.
You think it's a good deal? I mean, he's going to get increased security. He's going to get upgrades. I mean, there's other particulars, I think, and some other sort of spatial areas that he's going to be able to use. But also, though, is this something, do you think that he saw this, Ted Lewansis, also knowing that the city wants the Commanders back in the city, and he's going to be second fiddle no matter what, but he better get his money now before there's no money once the Commanders possibly come back?
Exactly. I mean, I think he wanted to get the best possible scenario, and I think he got what he wanted, everything that he wanted. Looking as a fan and as an outsider, it doesn't seem that they really needed much more, that everything looks fine the way it is. Yeah. But teams always want more.
Let's talk politics, Reecie. This is a good thing for the mayor?
Yes, absolutely.
Why so?
Well, I mean, sports are a central part of DC and the quality of life in downtown. And so not only does it prevent having a gaping hole in the Capital One arena that you have to fill with other activities, it also increased security or things that people are looking for. People want to feel safe when they go to these events. And so it's a win-win, I think. And everybody played hardball and got what they wanted in the end. So I don't see any losers in this scenario.
With all the tourism, too, it's in a convenient location. It's easy to get to from the metro. So you don't want to lose your teams. You want to keep all the assets that you can have. And
I think the city had reported that they could lose as much as $25 million a year.
Yeah.
How about from the business standpoint, the businesses around that? I know businesses in Chinatown, they were saying if these two teams leave, there will be no more Chinatown. Now, is that hyperbole and something else could come in there to fill that void?
I think that's kind of an exaggeration, but it does pump a lot of money into the economy when people are coming there for sports or when they're coming there for concerts. They come in early and get something to eat or go for drinks afterwards or, catch a movie or whatever they want to do. So I think it would have hurt a little bit. I don't think Chinatown would have disappeared. Can the city learn anything from this, Reecie, in the way this was handled? Because, again, some could say, they got a little lucky, right? Sharon Pratt, I think she was Dixon back then when the team left. She got a lot of criticism that she let Jack Kent Cooke out of the city, and if Mayor Barry was still the mayor, that would have never happened. And now they're trying to get them back. So is there anything you think to be learned from this to maybe be more proactive? If you were going to give the $500 million now, you could have given it, months ago when Leonis was asking for it. Is that fair?
Well, look, at the end of the day, they won. So it's hard to say that a winning strategy is not the right strategy. Who knows what kind of counter Alexandria would have came in with, or Virginia. So I think that they did the right thing. They didn't have to go up above what they originally wanted to give. And so it sounds like a win to me.
Let's sort of pivot to a more, some would say, kind of serious issue that's been dominating the local news and national news with the collapse of the Key Bridge in Baltimore. Latest news now we have is that they found 2 bodies of the 6 construction workers. They were found in a truck deep in the river. What's your sense of, number one, the coverage of the story, how it's been covered? I will say that I think it's been very kind of calm and somewhat nuanced. Sometimes it can be a little over the top with these kinds of stories. But what's your sense of how the story has been covered and the information that's been shared? And then we can kind of get into what it means economically beyond just the tragedy for the families of those who've lost their lives.
It seems to have.
No, I guess I didn't toss it to anyone. I'll let you go first, Reecie.
Yeah, I think generally the media has been pretty responsible with it. But, there's always that element of the right-wing media that has tried to racialize this, attack Mayor Brandon Scott. I've seen hideous comments about, likening him to a drug dealer and other kinds of things, calling him the DEI mayor.
I haven't seen that.
Oh, yes. It's really nasty on social media. And I think.
How are they tying the collapse of the bridge to that? How is that being done?
There's no real connection, but we're in an era where the Republicans and the right-wing media have made DEI the new N-word, right? And so they're actually being a little bit more transparent about it when they call Mayor Brandon Scott the DEI mayor. But I think it's very interesting and it's tragic when, as you mentioned, 2 of the workers recovered today. One is from Mexico, one is from Guatemala. These are workers who were doing the work of fixing potholes on the bridge. And so this wasn't a bridge that was neglected. This isn't a bridge that, white people could have came in and saved it. This was a bridge that withstood or was unable to withstand unimaginable impact from a large cargo ship, which, by the way, was owned by a Singaporean company, and it was commissioned by a Dutch company. And so all of these things have nothing to do with DEI, have nothing to do with the mayor being black or the governor being black, but this is how Republicans are trying to spin the story to make this seem like there's some sort of negligence or some sort of faultiness somewhere with black people or with the leaders that we have, and that's just completely ridiculous.
This is kind of a rhetorical question, but are you surprised?
No.
That it's gone there? I guess I would be a little surprised. It seemed to me that that's such a stretch to connect.
That's a huge stretch.
A container ship crashing into a bridge.
Yeah, it's a huge stretch. It needs to be more of a humanitarian story and focusing on safety and then looking at the economics of it. The main thing is that it would have been better if there was a tugboat to move that ship through the area, because then it would have, it wouldn't have been had to deal with the problem of losing power. Because once a boat loses power, it can go in any number of directions, particularly since it was already going like 7 to 9 knots at that point. And I've been on a boat.
I know nothing about knots, and I guess I should have researched it. How fast is that for us who drive cars? Is there any way to equate that?
I'm not exactly sure how fast it is, but it's fast enough going in an area like that. Out in the open water, it would be higher. It would be like in the teens, maybe like 15 knots. But I've been on a boat in Inner Harbor, a sailboat that lost power when it was drifting, and it goes pretty fast, particularly if the winds pick up and you can't control it. So there was nothing that could be done once it loses power if it's not being pulled, pushed or pulled into under that bridge. So that's what they need to look at, is in the future, how can you prevent something like that from happening? So maybe not just having pilots come on to kind of steer it out, but having tugboats to get it out of the area.
The Coast
Guard. You don't have to worry about that.
Yeah, the Coast Guard is on the scene. The NTSB is on the scene. The mayor of Baltimore is on the scene. The governor was there just maybe about an hour and a half ago, Governor Wes Moore, and he offered these comments.
We are going to take care of our people. At least 8,000 workers on the docks have jobs that have been directly affected by the collapse. We need to make sure we're supporting them in this moment, and we need to make sure that we are getting them back on the job.
Yanick, that's a delicate dance that you have to, and Reecie, a delicate dance you have to make as a politician and as a leader. You have 6 lives that were lost, but yet you have thousands of lives that are being affected by a bridge that collapsed in terms of economics and jobs. Wes Moore and his handling of this so far, and what you've heard from him, what he's saying, and the economic aspect of this. So the twofold question.
He's being responsible in what he's saying so far. At first you have to deal with the rescue and try to recover the bodies and, any lives that, take care of that part. They're going to have to take care of trying to get people's jobs back, getting the vessels that can't get out of there. And so that's going to be working with the water first. The bridge will come later because it's going to take a while to fix that. But in order to get the people who work on the water back to work and some of the other people who are affected, that's a lot of families that are affected of all backgrounds.
Yeah, and they're saying it's going to take, Reecie, at least, I heard one architect, maybe 10 years to fix that bridge. So then what do they do? Is it old school now where you have to get ferries to get people back and forth to where? Modern technology, there's much that you can do. But in terms of the economic part of it, I think it was interesting when I was hearing the governor, it's really an acknowledgement that you've got to get that back up and running again if folks, once their pocketbooks are being hit. He has no choice but to also frame it from an economic and a sort of a tragedy in terms of loss of lives.
Right. Well, I appreciate that he's talking about the workers in the sense of we have to support them, because when there's disruption to commerce, there's disruption to workers. And often this is framed in terms of corporations and their profits and the flow of goods. And I appreciated that he made this a human story as much as it is an economic story. So I suspect that there maybe will be some sort of, unemployment or some sort of assistance that will be available to those workers. And as the governor, it's his job to be a leader and getting getting people on board with providing that kind of assistance to people who've been disrupted from this tragedy. So I think it's really important, and I believe that they're trying to reroute traffic through tunnels and other methods, but this is not going to be an easy fix like we saw with, and I don't know if you guys remember in Pennsylvania, but there was that collapse, and they were able, I mean, they fixed that in record time. This is an astronomical undertaking that will be disruptive for a very long time.
I'm going to stay kind of in the politics realm because with this, infrastructure has been a big topic, especially from the Biden administration. And when he's comparing it to what former President Trump did, which he didn't feel was much. And Biden came right out, I think it was the next day, and said, listen, we're going to give you whatever you need. So again, framing it from a political point of view, most voters, do they think much about infrastructure unless it's potholes on the streets or where they're driving? Can Biden and even the governor of Maryland use this tragedy in terms of, hey, this is what we can do for infrastructure, maybe and how soon they can get the bridge built, the need for more infrastructure? I don't know if that's a stretch. Can they use this tragedy in some way to talk about infrastructure and the importance of it?
I mean, they can try, but some people, if it's not in their area, in their region, it's not going to matter that much to them unless they, the people in Pennsylvania could probably relate since they've gone through that. It's just like you were saying before, if it's your road, your bridge, your whatever, you're going to relate to it more. So people will see it as politics, but they do have to make sure that they're focusing on the human part of this, the jobs and all of that, and how they're going to take care of it, as well as the commuting part of it, because some people going around, that's time consuming, and that's going to, affects people's pockets as well. The federal support is definitely needed to get that bridge back up, and if they can do it quickly, it still takes time to build a bridge. It's not going to happen overnight. They did the one in Pennsylvania in record time, but this one seems worse.
You wanted to add to that, Reecie?
Yeah, I think that there's a way to demonstrate that, hey, this is why we've put $1 trillion into infrastructure. We passed a $1.2 trillion infrastructure plan package so that we don't have things like this happen. But you also have to emphasize that this was something that was completely unfathomable and not a matter of negligence or a matter of deterioration of the bridge. And I think that Republicans, you had Congresswoman Nancy Mace, who tried to say, well, what are they spending the infrastructure money on? And we still have bridges collapsing. And so I think that Democrats are going to have to be very forceful in threading that needle to making it clear that we are investing in infrastructure. Infrastructure is needed. There are bridges that are at danger of collapsing, but this one is not a result of that neglect. But because we have that infrastructure money, we can move quickly to get this bridge rebuilt. So they have to make sure that the Republicans do not take control of this narrative and make this a DEI thing, which is absurd, but they're very disciplined about their anti-DEI messaging, and they're disciplined when they want to put out misinformation. I saw Mayor Brandon Scott was saying, don't be a bridge engineer online. So they can't let this be something that people run away with.
I agree. Now, going forward, when they do rebuild it, there are some things they can do differently, like putting more supports or concrete around the basis of it, so that would help a little bit. But when you have something that big, it's going down. There's no way to stop that. And even with some of the structure, they were talking about how it's interconnected and doing that in some type of segments or something like that. It's still, if it gets hit again, it's coming down. I mean, that'll help for certain types of accidents, but it's not going to help for everything like something like this if it happens again.
And just a few minutes before we take a break, I was wondering if the nationality of the workers who died, if that has any effect on this story, if that makes people think differently, because most of them, as you mentioned, Reecie, I think they were from El Salvador, from Mexico, Guatemala, and there's three others. I had them in my notes here, but they all were from outside of the United States. And I wonder if that paints a different picture of the tragedy of the people who were on that bridge working.
I don't think it should. And I know that initially, as soon as it happened, some people were sending out prayers and messages of hope on, social media, and they didn't know who was in the water. And it could happen to anybody. And this would have been 10 times worse if this had happened during rush hour. or something like that. And that would have affected a lot of people of all backgrounds. So I don't think people need to focus on race or ethnicity or making crazy DEI connections to something like this.
All right. Before we move into this issue with Ronna McDaniel, the former RNC chair, former contributor to MSNBC, Utah basketball team, and some racism in Idaho, college sports betting. Maybe we'll have a minute to get into former President Donald Trump and his Bible USA. We're going to talk about that, but we're going to take a break. But don't forget, you can hear every edition of the Daily Drum Insight segment via podcast on WHUR.com, or you can download the 96.3 HD2 app on your smartphone, and you can hear the program live in its entirety. The Daily Drum, it will continue on SiriusXM channel 141, 96.3 HD2, and 98.3 FM. I'm Bramante Bryant, in for Harold Fisher. John Mons is next with the original Quiet Storm on WHUR. We'll be back in just a few seconds.
Hospitals in crisis.
A hospital that mostly serves low-income people.
What's the lay of the land out there?
Difficult. The essential hospitals that are in urban markets, they're always living hand to mouth.
In a system driven by disparity.
The structural racism of how we pay for health care.
Frontline and NPR investigate.
In the rules that we have set up, there are winners and there are losers.
This is unacceptable.
The healthcare divide.
Next on WHUT.
Our program has been a very dominant program since its inception.
I have the all-time assist record.
I'm the winningest coach in the history of Howard University in any sport.
Howard's always been a global brand. I've been hearing about Howard since I was young.
One of the things that I felt immediately was the culture. That's something that Howard prides itself on.
The legacy of Howard women's basketball is simply excellence.
Tonight at 9 p.m.
Back to the Daily Drum on SiriusXM channel 141, 96.3 HD2, 98.3 FM, and WHUT TV. I'm Bramante Bryant, in for Harold Fisher. This is the Reporters Roundtable. We are joined by Dr. Yanick Rice-Lamb, professor of journalism at Howard University and co-founder of FierceForBlackWomen.com, and Reecie Colbert. She is the founder of BlackWomenViews Media and contributor and host for SiriusXM. Let's talk about D.C.'s drug-free zones. Today kicked off another 7 of the zones throughout all the quadrants: northwest, southwest, southeast, northeast. And I want to talk a little bit about, are they effective? Mm-hmm. Because, enforcement hits those zones for 3, 4, 5 days, kind of cleans it up. Folks scurry, move about. Then enforcement has to leave, and then it comes back. So is this kind of a yo-yo thing, or is it more window dressing? What are your thoughts on these drug-free zones? I don't know if it was Council Chair Mendelson no, it wasn't Mendelson. I think it might have been Robert White, who said we don't really need these because D.C. is already supposed to be a drug-free zone. Mm-hmm. So, Reecie, what do you think about this efforts of the drug-free zones? Are they effective? Are they needed? Is it window dressing?
I think it is window dressing, right? It's just to make it appear like you're doing something. Excuse me. To his point, I'm sorry, can you go? I'm having a cough.
Okay. We'll let Yanick.
I agree. I also think it's window dressing. I feel like they have to do something, so they're going to try different things, and there's nothing necessarily wrong with that. But it's people can leave, if they know it's going to be there during that time period, and then come back there after they move somewhere else. I'm also a little concerned about, since they're focusing on groups of as small as 2 people, so that in that case, it might not be people who are doing any drugs.
And again, this could be
that could be an average person.
Yeah, either you're doing drugs, or they're concerned that groups could be congregating to sell drugs. So then you kind of get into a whole lot of your rights about, and then it's sort of like a vagrancy. That's the thing that I'm concerned about, right? is the rights. There could be 2 people who just happen to be in that area, and maybe they're just socializing and passing through the area, and they have nothing to do with selling drugs or buying drugs. So that's the thing I'm concerned about if you're focusing on like 2 people or certain groups
and that kind of thing. So I just hope it doesn't go overboard.
What do you said you think it's window dressing, Reecie. Why so?
Yeah, I mean, to your point, it's just two people. I mean, two people can be doing anything. So, but people want to see something happening, you know.
That's where I was going to go.
That's really what it boils down to. It's all kabuki theater.
So then what should they do?
Well, you have to focus on prevention. But people don't have the appetite for prevention because they see a problem right now and they want it to be fixed. But you have to invest in, why are people hanging around? You know, why are people turning to drugs or anything like that? If you focus in the intervention programs, which they had been in the past, you will see some of these issues start to dissipate. But that is a longer term approach as opposed to an immediate, let's have people disperse so that doesn't look like something negative is happening.
Because you need to look at how are the drugs getting here in the first place. Why are there drugs that are able to be sold or bought? So a lot of times we don't look at the systemic issues or try to do enough about those kind of things. Same with violence. It's, you know, some of the gunpowder that's getting in the hands of young people, where's that coming from? And why is it here? Why is it available to them?
But that takes a while.
It does take a while.
And, you know, we've already sort of talked about the politics of even the bridge collapse. And so you've got to show people something, right?
But if the will is there and you avoid the problem in the first place, then you don't have all these problems building up all the time. And a lot of times that's why Band-Aids get put on different problems, because somebody's benefiting, a lot of people are benefiting, and it does take longer, it is more work. But if you don't go after those things and try to fix, you know, things that involve like things that are outside of the country, things that are in other parts of the country, then it's just going to be continue to be a problem on the lower level that affects everyday people who do want to see something happening.
Yeah, and I was having a conversation just yesterday with this lawyer, Debbie Hines. She's been on the show before, and she's got a new book out about the criminal justice system and how it's affecting African Americans from the prosecutor's standpoint. And she was talking about sort of this vagrancy and sort of how especially African Americans sort of get caught up in the system. And then before you know it, you're on probation and then you're staying in the system. And I could see where these drug-free zones,
they contribute.
You could sort of contribute to that. Like if you're standing around but yet not doing something. But I can also see from the politician's standpoint, the government standpoint, you know, how are we going to handle this or what are we going to do? But I want to stay in politics here. Now, this topic, I was saying in our meeting today, I actually think, I was like, this could be the whole show. And this, am I getting her first name right? Is it Ronna McDaniel or Ronna McDaniel? I never know how she's pronounced.
Yeah.
But the former chair of the RNC was hired by MSNBC, paid contributor, to talk about the election and get the inside information on someone who's worked with Trump, around Trump, the RNC, as we're moving into the election cycle. The hosts, the journalists at NBC, uproar.
Yeah.
You're bringing on someone that promoted lies, that promoted the steal of the 2020 election, and pushed a lot of Trump's inaccuracies, let's say. And now you want her to come in and be a voice of the conservative movement. And they said no.
Yeah.
And they said it on the air. And then I think today they pulled the plug on her and she may sue. Reecie, what do you think, number one, of the top brass's decision to even hire her?
It was miscalculation. I mean, she doesn't bring much to the table. She's a loser, right? She's one of the least successful RNC chairs. They lost the White House. They lost the House in 2018. They did not have this red wave they were supposed to get. So she's not even effective at her job. And then she's persona non grata in Trump world. So this access I think that they were trying to get through bringing her on was really not worth the trouble. And I think they have to think more carefully about how they're lending credibility to these people. Because when you're platforming a person as a paid contributor, you're putting the credibility of your network behind them. You're telling your audience that this person is a trusted voice in our media apparatus. And so she's not worthy of that, point blank period. And I think that the fact that who would be her peers revolted publicly at the risk of their own job, really goes to show just how much they underestimated the damage that could be done from appointing or trying to bring her on in that position. And for $300,000 at that, come on, that's ridiculous.
Journalist Dr. Yanick Rice-Lamb, was this a journalistic misstep?
Absolutely. It was a journalistic misstep, and I think that everyone was right to revolt for that. At a time when, the news media is under attack for misinformation and disinformation, to bring someone inside who does exactly that is a bad move. Because, all news outlets have to be about helping the public be comfortable with the news and know that they're basically truth tellers. We're all truth tellers. And that's not what we're about. And you bring someone in who doesn't add any value to what you're trying to cover, so that's damaging. I think that a lot of journalists already have inside tracks. They have a lot of insight. They provide, good analysis. There's strategists out there who are not doing what she has done, who could also work. But you have to be very careful about who you put on the air or who you let into pages or on websites and things like that to protect your brand, but more importantly, to kind of maintain the trust of the public.
Here's the interesting thing, though. It wasn't as if the MSNBC top brass didn't know what she had said, didn't know the positions that she had taken. And it's like, sometimes things come out and maybe you didn't do your research and then you find out you've hired someone and they did this and you go, oh, okay, well, we kind of didn't do our due diligence. This was so public.
Yeah.
I think that's the thing that kind of caught me. It's like, do they really think, and especially their audience, and I thought, is it really worth just getting someone that's on the inside?
I think that, part of that is also going after ratings. Even if you look at all the coverage that Trump has gotten over the years, a lot of, in the past, some of that wouldn't even made the air or made it into ink or anything like that because they knew it wasn't credible, but they give him such a strong platform and the people who surround him, and that's, I think, happening in the same vein.
But Reecie, is that sort of the problem, right? If you want to get someone on who's close to Trump, who maybe has been a spokesperson, so to speak, doesn't that group sort of get very, very thin if we know that the former president tends to bend the truth or just lie?
Yeah.
And then he has folks who support that and speak for him. But yet now election time is up and you've got these journalistic institutions that want a conservative voice, want someone that's worked closely with him. Isn't that pool of people that you're looking for going to be kind of thin if they've worked with him? And doesn't that mean they're supporting what he's pushing?
Yeah, I think that what it shows is that they're trying to do business as usual. Normally a former chair of a major party would be the kind of person you'd want to scoop up.
They've got Michael Steele already. Right?
Absolutely. Michael Steele was at least a relatively successful Republican national chair. And they're trying to do business as usual with people who were not doing business as usual, people who were tearing down our institutions, people who were trying to change the fabric of our country, our democracy. And so they always have an appetite to rehabilitate former Trumpers. I mean, we've seen them all over CNN, MSNBC, and then they sanitize their images and they kind of wash away their sins. But this is too extreme of an example for that to work. And I'm glad that at least the peers, the journalists and the hosts on MSNBC and NBC said, no, this is not okay, because the fact that they have normalized so many former Trumpers is why Trump is also normalized, despite the fact that he has been held criminally liable for sexual assault. He's been held civilly liable for sexual assault, for defamation, for fraud with his businesses, owing $400-something million, having to take bond for $125 million or whatever the number is now, under 91 criminal indictments. This man has been normalized in large part because they've normalized everybody who was right along the ride with him.
And now he's selling a Bible, by the way. God Bless the USA Bible. And if you buy that Bible for $59.99, you get a free copy of the Constitution, Declaration of Independence, Pledge of Allegiance, and the Bill of Rights. I think I got all of that in. And he held it up the right way, too.
The correct way?
The correct way.
Because he didn't do that before.
No, when I saw the video. How will Republicans are using this, though, now to say, look at this left-leaning liberal media that is trying to squash the voices of conservatives. Elon Musk came out on X and basically said that in so many ways. Obviously, Donald Trump went on social media and said these crazies. They don't want the conservatives to say anything. Is that something, though, MSNBC now is going to have to live with once they make this mistake and now they fire her? That's the blowback that they're going to get from the conservative media and maybe conservative-leaning folks out there in the country?
Well, they're going to get blowback from what happened, but they just have to keep moving on, beyond that and call a spade a spade. So, and also point out some of the hypocrisy in what Trump is doing with the Bible and all of this religious leaning. He's not a particularly religious person. So,
which Liz Cheney said, too. That was another one. Liz Cheney put out a post. She said, "Happy Holy Week, Donald." I think she said something like, not only promoting the book, you should go buy it. And then she actually told him to read a particular verse in the Bible, which is said, "Thou shalt not commit adultery." So Liz Cheney was coming hard for Donald Trump. So,
but can I just add?
Yeah.
Elon Musk canceled Don Lemon's show that was supposed to be on his platform because Don Lemon asked him questions that he didn't want to ask.
And Don Lemon said that, he knew what this show kind of was going to be about, right?
Yeah. I mean,
he touched a nerve.
Yeah, Don Lemon was basically kicked off for doing the same kinds of hard-hitting, relatively hard for, mainstream journalism, media. He was kicked off of CNN for basically the same type of thing. And so that's why you cannot take Republicans seriously with their insults. You can't let them kind of you can't let them lead you in how you do business, because they do all the things that they try to project on everybody else are doing, and they do it shamelessly.
And you have to call them on it.
And I was just going to say, Yanick, you mentioned this. I would just think from a journalistic standpoint, you're a professor, you teach a class, I teach one every so often. When this stuff happens, this is where young folks who are looking to become journalists, and oftentimes they're in class, they'll go, see, this is what I'm saying. Why should we even want to do journalism? Because you have people at the top that will hire people who have helped promote untruths, and aren't we supposed to be truth seekers in terms of journalism? So I do think this kind of thing does damage.
Well, I think that's when you have to use it as a teachable moment, and then you have to kind of point out the people who spoke up and said something, and to let them know that that's what they need to do too. And that's one of the things I always tell my students, kind of like if you see something, say something, and you have to do that all the time, no matter how small it is. You're in the newsroom for a reason, and you have to make your voice heard, and you have to call out things that are happening that shouldn't happen, or how to make them better, or if they're incomplete and they're not talking to people over here, and how they can be included.
All right, this wasn't supposed to be a sports show, but we do have kind of a lot of sports in the show. We always start with the Caps and the Wizards. I wanted to touch on, this is sports, but it's involving race and society. The Utah women's basketball team, not the Final Four, March Madness is going on. And so the ladies tournament is happening also. And the Utah team was in Idaho, and they were staying at this hotel. And I guess they came out and they were on their way to dinner. And these trucks came by and throwing out racial slurs, and they had the Confederate flag. And they said then when they walked back from the restaurant, the truck was following them. I don't want to ask, are we surprised? Because I think I know the answer to that. But it still is a bit kind of shocking sometimes, when with the danger of that and how dangerous that is. Reecie, what are your thoughts on that and this still happening?
Like, what are y'all mad for? Like, what's the problem? Like, you have every privilege extended to you. You have every leg up extended to you, and you still mad. That's what doesn't make any sense. This is racism unprovoked for people who are just, younger, teenagers. They're there to have a good time. They're there to celebrate. These are accomplished young ladies who are going to compete, in a tournament. And these degenerates are out there harassing them and being racist. And it's like, you have the Republican Party and you have the right-wing media making minorities, whoever else under this DEI, the villains, those people, these people in these trucks harassing young ladies, those are the real villains. We got to figure out why y'all are mad, and it don't have nothing to do with what we got going on over here. It has something to do with what's going on inside and what you've been trained to think. That's the untraining that needs to happen, not talking about slavery in this country, not talking about a person's sexuality in this country. We don't need to untrain that. We need to untrain whatever it is that's causing these degenerates in trucks to yell out racial slurs at basketball students.
And Yanick, they ended up having to change hotels. And this isn't the first time this has happened, if I can remember, in terms of this tournament and hotels and things of that nature, depending on sort of where you are. This is supposed to be the big highlights of the college basketball season, right? And I would think, too, in particular, I mean, it shouldn't matter whether it's men or women, but just in society where women are oftentimes more vulnerable to these kinds of things, that has to add another layer to this story.
Well, I think that, what she was saying, I agree with. A lot of this comes back to their families and their beliefs, and going all the way back to slavery, if people don't want to acknowledge that all the time. But the climate in this country is just really messed up across the board. And people also need to see, particularly heading towards an election, how all these things are interconnected with the book bans, crazy DEI conversations, the way people are treated, slurs, things that are happening to students in school, whether it's about their hair, about learning, or all sorts of things. They're all interconnected in a way where, back to white supremacy. And that needs to be dealt with. And until people accept that and recognize it, I don't even know what the answer is to it because it's so entrenched. But people need to acknowledge it and quit denying it, that it exists. People are talking about their feelings being hurt about, things, but I don't know why that's coming up. But it's repeating a cycle before when, athletes or different people were traveling around the country to just play, and they get attacked, or they can't stay certain places. They have to be in, safer situations. So a lot of the things that have happened in the past that people thought were at least a little bit better are being heightened again. And so that's something that we have to pay a lot of attention to.
And in talking about these young people in college, and this is probably our last sports story, but this is also important too, that the NCAA is coming out, betting now it's sports betting, it's everywhere. Before it was like, we're not going to get involved in it. And finally, these sports leagues, even colleges just said, okay, it's here. And what are we going to do? How are we going to stop it? But now the NCAA is concerned because there's this prop betting that's going on where Reece, instead of just betting on the game, the bet is, okay, I'm going to bet a little parlay that's Reece will score at least 5 points in the game and have 2 rebounds and maybe 1 turnover.
Yeah.
So it's specific to you. And the concern now is that these college students could be corrupted because you could say, well, instead of doing that, I'm not going to play or I'm hurt, and you put money on it not happening, and so then you can win. So is this a genie out of the bottle kind of thing? You can't put it back in now. You can't, can you sort of pull this betting away? Because I was being asked, well, what's the difference between the college and the pro situation? They bet on pro games, so, and they bet on all these little props. I said, well, pro players make $10 million a year. So if you go to them on average and say, look, I'll give you $20,000 if you decide not to play, they're going to
Right.
worry about that.
Yeah.
College, you offer me $5,000 and I don't play, and then you get a cut of that, then that can be corruptible. So is this, again, a genie out of the bottle kind of thing where this is with us now, and it's one more concern we have to have for young people, young athletes.
Yeah.
And especially those who might not be coming from a lot of means that are easy to be corrupted.
Well, I mean, there's always ways that systems can be exploited, when it comes to betting. My bigger concern is one of the things that they outlined was that there could be retaliation against players because people lose money, because players haven't, met this specific set of criteria that they don't have to meet because they're playing the game that they're supposed to play. That's my bigger concern, is the safety of these players and people being out there being crazy and spending a lot of money on these games, and something can go wrong and they hold the players accountable for that.
You know, that's such a great point, Yanick, because they have players quoted in some of these articles, professional and college, saying these fans are out there, and if they've got a bet on you about what you're supposed to do in that particular game, these fans start screaming like, hey, man, you know, I've got you making 2 free throws. What are you doing? You got to get to the foul line. You know, these players are like, what? But they know what's going on. So it's not like, you know, when we were growing up, it's just like, look, can you shoot the ball and score so we can win the game?
Yeah.
Now it's like you have to do this. And so once you get to that college level, and again, this is where I go with the genie out of the bottle, is this also a situation where, you know, is college sports really an amateur game now? Now that you're factoring in all of this, and you're factoring in the danger that you have here, and that's why I keep going back to, can you pull that back?
Well, I think I think you can pull back the prop betting, because that's too personal. Like and you have access to the players a little bit easier. If LeBron or something and said, you didn't have enough assists, I didn't make money. I can't get to him as easy as a college. You know, people can get to a college player easier. You know, if they're on the same level, they might be in class with them or see them, and it's just too much temptation, as you were saying also, in terms of, you know, pressuring them to do certain things if someone's gonna give them some money from it or something like that. So the prop betting in terms of their individual performance is a bigger problem than betting on the entire game itself. I don't know if that's gonna go away, the betting on the final scores and that kind of thing, but the prop betting is a bigger problem. And also now that college players can also make money off of their, you know, individually for promotional purposes too, which is not necessarily a bad thing, because the schools make so much money off of the players and they don't get, you know, anything personally. So I think that's actually a good thing. Of course, there's an inequity sometimes if these players are making all of these and this players are not making that much money over that. But so I think that, you know, I think you have to always be careful when you're talking about students, and it shouldn't be exactly the same as it is at the pro level.
I want to throw in something that might not have been on your list, but I want to just get your thoughts on this. I mentioned this in the newscast about the Ahmaud Arbery case and the 3 men who were convicted in his killing from 2020, who now say, it tells the federal appeals court today, yeah, we kind of want a new trial because the prosecutor was kind of making it seem like we were racist and it really didn't have anything to do with the act at the time, so therefore there should be a mistrial and we should be retried. Is there anything to that, or is it them just throwing something out there to say, you know, listen, because his father, basically, Ahmaud Arbery's father said, no way, this is not going to happen. We're going to galvanize the community to make sure that there's not even a retrial in this case. We've seen this kind of stuff in America's history. Is it possible, or is it anything possible? In this day and age, can they get a retrial based on saying, hey, you were really calling us racist and it really didn't match up to the act and what was doing at the time? We didn't know, basically, when we went looking for this person who we thought had broken into a home, whether or not they were black or not.
I think it's ridiculous. It's their lawyers are going to just continue to take their money and try to get them off, but they still have state charges. So, I mean, it's just a desperate move to say that, well, yeah, we were racist, but how do you know we're racist towards him specifically? The end of the day, they were convicted, and they could have taken a deal, and they decided not to do that. Or actually, the deal was withdrawn because of objections from the family, and they went to trial and they were convicted, and that's that. And sure, you can create all the appeals that you want, but it's going nowhere fast.
I agree with that, and I think they're just trying to split hairs at this point.
Can they?
I don't think so.
Not in Georgia?
I mean, they could try it there. They might be easier there than some places, but still, it's done and over with, or should be.
Appeals are very difficult to win anyway. So, I mean, it's usually something structural, something major that, and just a person saying certain things is usually not going to be something that they're going to win on, particularly if there was no objection. Like, it would have been one thing if the council was objecting to certain words and the judge overruled it, and then maybe you might have standing to say, well, the judge shouldn't have sustained it or overruled it or whatever. But just simply saying that a person made these comments during a trial is not going to be adequate, I think, in this case.
Yeah, this is the wild card round, so I'm throwing stuff out here that you may not know what's coming. This week, Donald Trump's bond was dropped from, what was it, like 540 million down to about 100. Am I getting that right? You never get into numbers, I always tell you as journalists, but it was 170, something like that.
Yeah.
Are you surprised that that happened and that bond was dropped and the judge, put a hush, a partial gag order on Trump about what he could say and not say? Are we just kind of now just, and that's probably why I didn't even have it on the list, because I'm like, is this one of those stories where we're just like, we just keep seeing this. It's the same story, just a different date. But does it still matter?
I'm not surprised by anything that happens concerning Trump, and it, it's like a pendulum. It swings different ways. But I mean, I just hope that justice is done at the end of the day in all his different cases, in all the different scenarios, in all the different places.
What do you think, Reecie?
I think that Trump's bond being reduced is proof of what my hypothesis has been all along, is that this is the entire reason that Trump is running for president. Because he's in so much civil liability, so much vulnerability, criminal vulnerability, the best thing that he has going for him is that he is the presumptive Republican nominee for president, potentially the next president, again, of the United States. This is the leverage that he has, and it's a very powerful lever that he has to wield against the justice system, because we are a country that prides itself on we don't imprison our political opponents and da-da-da-da-da. And so that's why he's running. That's why he was always going to run. I don't think he has any interest in being president, but he has an interest in staying out of jail, and he has an interest in holding on to as much money as possible. And we know he ain't got it too. So they don't want to be the person that kind of puts the nail in the coffin of President Trump's presidential campaign.
In terms of the justice system,
the justice, no judge wants to be that person who does this to a former president of the United States who's running for president.
And so Trump is using that to his advantage.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and the adoration of his fans.
Yeah. If Trump wasn't running for president, we would be having a completely different conversation, I believe. But because he is running for president, that's why he is getting pass after pass after pass.
In our last few moments, I did notice, and we're so early, I mean, it's March. In the old days, we wouldn't even be talking, we would still be talking about the primaries and who was sort of positioning. Here, we're already sort of talking about the general election. And in our closing moments, since we're sort of on that topic, I did see where the polling is tightening a little bit, where Biden is coming up a little bit. And some of that folks have said is because now folks know Trump is the presumptive nominee for the GOP. So the focus really is going to be more on him, and that you will see those differences, and it will cause Biden's numbers to sort of creep up. I mean, I'm not asking you to be Nostradamus, but is there something to that, you think, Yanick, and we know polling, especially over the last few years of these elections, it's really hard to really put a whole lot of credence in them.
I think, well, I'm not surprised that his numbers are going up, but the polling, it can go either way a lot of times. And I remember when the second time Obama ran, when they were saying that there was a chance that he might not make it back in. And I was in line in the cold, line wrapping around this library with a lot of other black people. And I said, if this is happening across the country, he's back in. So it's like people weren't looking at what's on the ground, they're looking at numbers. And those numbers don't always represent everybody, even with the good margin of error or whatever. So I think that you can't just look at the polls. There's a lot of other things a factor, because people don't always tell the truth in polls anyway. They say what sometimes they think people want to hear. So I think the truth remains to be seen. I think that Biden could make it back in. It depends what people are looking at. I think that with all these things that are happening racially, including some of the things we talked about today, that should be sound an alarm for a lot of people about where this country is headed or could be headed with another 4 years of Trump. So people have to really take that seriously. And the whole age thing, they're both about this roughly, they're both older. So I think there's a lot of hairs being splitted, but Trump's getting Trump is getting a lot of attention, and which he thrives on. But people have to really, take a good hard look at what this means for democracy.
Well, we have hit a lot of topics tonight on the Reporters Roundtable. Dr. Yanick Rice-Lamb, professor of journalism at Howard University, co-founder of FierceForBlackWomen.com, Reecie Colbert, founder of BlackWomenViews Media, contributor and host of SiriusXM. Thank you both so much for being with us.
Thank you.
Thank you for your dexterity as I kind of took you in places that you didn't know where I was going, but you show what great journalists you are. That's the Daily Drum for this Wednesday, March 27th. I'm Bramante Bryant in for Harold Fisher. Have a great night.
This program was produced by WHUT and made possible by contributions from viewers like you. For more information on this program or any other program, please visit our website at WHUT.org. Thank you.